Welcome to episode 9 of the Wrassingh Show. Today's special guest is one of the most respected and fan-favorite stars from Scotland. Also known as the Sin of Professional Wrestling, she is trained by the Glasgow Pro Wrestling Asylum. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so thrilled to introduce to you the beautiful bruiser, Molly Spartan.
Molly, thank you so much for joining us today. We are very, very excited to have you here with us. So how are you doing today, Molly?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. It's a bit rainy outside here in Scotland, but that's kind of normal.
Okay. And Molly, you know, this the biggest event right now in the world is, of course, the pandemic, which is sad. So can you tell us how are things right now in Scotland? Are things under control?
In Scotland, yeah. I mean, I have to say I'm very... So the person that runs... So obviously in the UK, it's made of 4 different countries. And although we have Westminster, which has Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister, Scotland itself is actually run by its own governing body, the Scottish Parliament, and that's run by a woman called Nicola Sturgeon. And I am very happy to say that she is an absolute boss, and she has been dealing with this the best she can. It's not been perfect, but any mistake she has made, she has apologised and retracted. And at the moment, Scotland are doing really great. Very, very low death rates. Some days with absolutely zero. And yeah, we're really sort of trying to move forward. There's things we've put in place. It's things like if we go outside and we go to the supermarket for groceries, or even going out for clothes shopping, and shops have started to open up and cinemas have started to open up. You have to wear like a mask, face covering is required, and basically doing social distancing. And so far, that people have been sort of coherent in that, and is actually being kept under control. So yeah, it's one of those stages where, yeah, it's making great differences and we are starting to move forward, but we've got to try and keep with it in order to make sure that it does get better and we can get back to normal. And I'm maybe getting married on Halloween, so it'd be quite nice to be able to have my wedding. So I will be keeping those masks on.
You know, it's funny because you just mentioned, and I also agree that these days politics is like the wrestling world. The females are doing it better. So if you look at New Zealand, if you look at Scotland, yeah. I
kind of said that to a couple of friends. I was like, I'm just saying, a lot of the countries that have really dealt with it well are run by women.
Right. It's just out there. It's obvious. So yeah. It's just out there. So Molly, do you usually stay like in London area, or do you stay in Scotland? Did you move to Scotland?
Oh no, I stay in Scotland. I'm actually from a small town in Scotland called Kirkcaldy, which is from a place called Fife, which is on the east coast. But now I've moved to the west coast of Scotland, which is in Glasgow, which is where I trained. It's where I learned to wrestle, and yeah, so that's where I stay.
All right. So, Molly, your ring name, Molly Spartan, it's very catchy and it's very, very strong. So can you tell us something about its origin and how did you, decide to make it your ring name?
It's a strange one. So before I got into wrestling, I did a lot of other things like alternative and like pin-up modeling and stuff. So it actually was a name that I'd had before I came into wrestling. But it was a name that was given to me by weirdly by a drunk roller derby team. I went to see I think it was Edinburgh versus Glasgow team or something. It was a match I went to see, and they got really, really drunk, and it was afterwards, and they'd lost, they thought they'd lost their ticket money. It was in this wee tin. Thought they'd lost their ticket money. And I was sober. I don't drink, so I'm straight edge, just like CM Punk. Don't drink, don't smoke anything.
I don't drink.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always have been, and I was sober, so I'm sipping on a Coke, and they were like frantic, but I didn't know what was going on. I could see them sort of in the pub being a bit frantic, and I was like, and I overheard what was going on, and I noticed that like underneath one of their chairs there was this metal tin, and I just went, is this it? Like I just picked them, they were like, oh my God, Jade! And I was like, first of all, like, well, let's buy you a drink. And I was like, oh, no, we don't drink. Like, it's cool, it's fine, as long as you're good, then that's good. And they were like, so I think in roller derby it's a big thing to get your name, like to have your name and the origins of your name and stuff, which of course it is in wrestling as well. Right. But they were like, let's give you a name. And I was like, okay. So originally it started off as a Dolly Spartan. And I was like, I don't really like the Dolly bit. Like, I'm not really a Dolly girl. And they were like, is their name? And I was like, I like the name Molly. And they were like, Molly Spartan it is. It wasn't until like years later that I kind of clocked that I think it was a Dolly Parton reference. But like a twist on it. So a lot of people have come up to me going, are you just a massive Dolly Parton fan? And I'm like, no. And then I realized, Dolly Parton, Molly Spartan is pretty similar. Yeah. I mean, after it, I sort of looked into like, obviously when you've got a name like Spartan, you kind of need to look into the history of the people and stuff. And in all honesty, when I started looking into it, like they were one of the first like civilizations that believed that if it didn't matter about gender, if you were strong enough and you were able to fight, they would send you off to war, male or female. It didn't really matter about gender, and it was all about having a strong society and having a strong like nation. So if you could fight and you were a warrior, you got sent away to fight. So I kind of like that as well, that I've always been that kind of girl that was like, I'll climb the tree just like the boys. It doesn't really matter. I can do that too. So when I started sort of learning about the Spartan thing, I was like, okay, I'm good with the Spartan bit. Like I could see the relation there.
Very interesting. Wow. When I asked you that question, I did not expect that answer. Very interesting. Well, I've got a question now. We talked about your ring name. I have a question about your nickname, which is the sin of professional wrestling.
Yes. So I have two. I have the beautiful bruiser, because, I look like this, and I'll happily punch you in the face. But the sin of professional wrestling is basically it's quite simple. It means that you don't necessarily always agree with what I do or my way of going about things, but you always come back to see more and to see what I do next. So it's that idea of that I myself are a sin. So like with sins, there may be greed or lust or things. They're things that people say that they're like, oh no, I would never do that.
Right.
But they do. And everybody has their wee thing that they have on the side. And I am just the embodiment of it. I sort of embrace being a dick sometimes rather than trying to shy away from it.
Wow. It's very deep. Very nice. So you have been a staple of UK wrestling since the year 2016, and you've seen and you've accomplished a lot since that time in a very short span of time, I would say. So if you could describe the UK wrestling in just one word, what would it be?
Ooh.
I know it has its ups and its downs. I know it has its pros and its cons. And that's why I asked this question. I knew that nobody could answer that better than you. Somebody who's so deep into this industry.
If it wasn't like one word's hard because it means. But I think if I was to put if I was to put like a tag on it,
sure,
I'd put like always a work in progress.
Okay.
Because no matter when I've been, because you say that I've been a staple in the ring since 2016, right, but I've actually been around a lot longer than that. I originally started filming wrestling. So I worked for a promotion in Glasgow called ICW. I started working for them over 10 years ago now. And basically I was in to film. So I did all their backstage promos and sort of filmed everything that happened backstage alongside Veronica Lestrange and Jennifer Louise. Veronica Lestrange, very well-known burlesque performer in Glasgow, and Jen Louise is from Cultaholic. So anybody that's online wrestling fans know Jen Louise. And I worked alongside them to film backstage. So anything that was going on. So in all honesty, I say, although I started training 2014, really going end of 2014 into 2015. I'd been around longer than that. I'd been around since 2010.
Right.
So I've seen like the birth, especially in Glasgow, of the scene growing. So I'd seen it from an underground. The first ICW show I ever seen, and I was there as a fan, was under a place called Jongleurs.
Okay.
Which was a comedy club in Glasgow, and it was underground, and it was small, it was very sweaty, and then it grew to another a well-known nightclub in Glasgow called the Garage, and then it went on and on and on, and then it ended up in the Hydro. So we went from a couple of hundred people to 6,000 people within a space of like 5-6 years. So it's always growing, it's always developing, and it's not just that. Like from when I first went in, it was really the beginning of some major stars starting their careers. So even with NXT UK, you've got all the Gallus boys, you've got Kenny Williams, you've got Noam Dar, you've got even Nikki Cross, who was just on after the SmackDown Championship at the weekend there, Killian Dane, Big Davo. So basically anybody British, I know when they've come through that thing. And I was there when Drew was let go the first time, and he came back to Scotland and became really good friends with Drew. And I've never seen a man more driven and motivated in my entire life. That it's inspirational. Like I openly say, like people say to me, like, "Oh, you got to throw a good clothesline." And I go, "Yeah, Drew taught me that." And they go, "What?" I went, "Drew hit me with 3 clotheslines, one after the other, and you limp fast." And somebody like Drew McIntyre's throwing a clothesline, like, "Oh, okay, that's how it's meant to feel, and that's what it's okay." So yeah, I've had a great. So there's like seeing the first matches of somebody like Piper Niven,
right,
and where she is now, and Kaylee Ray, who at that point was just a wee lassie when I first seen her. She was just a wee girl, but now she's the NXT UK Women's Champion and is completely dominating and is just incredible. Like she's an incredible. The two of them are two of the best wrestlers in the world, and it's got nothing to do with gender. So yeah, like it's always developing, and even now, when all those people have moved on to bigger things, there's all this new talent coming through as well. That it's always just constant. It never stops. Maybe it's a bit quieter, but it never stops. So it's always a work in progress.
That's beautiful, beautifully put. So these Scottish wrestlers these days, they're making big moves in the industry. So what do you think is the reason? Why are they making these big moves? What have they always been so driven about wrestling, or what is it? What is the secret behind it?
It's a different one. Like, so I think because we're such a small island, especially in Scotland and stuff, like there was a point there genuinely is a point, WWE actually did a round table with this, where in WWE there was 5 Scottish champions at one point. So there was the 2 Gallus boys, there was Kaylee Ray, Drew, and Nikki had the tag titles. And that is literally 1 in a million.
Absolutely.
That's not even a figure. Scotland has just over 5 million people in it. That is 1 in a million. But it's that idea of, I know in Scotland, Drew was the catalyst. Like British wrestling has always been a revered sort of style and things like that, but it was more revered, and like a lot of British folk would go over to Japan rather than the US because the technical side of things was more something that related with the Japanese style and can easily be molded. But now with such a, even if you look at it this way, with such a thing of like the popularity of things like the UFC and MMA and things like that, there's more realism that's coming into it. So it's not, although you'll have your fun moments of comedy and things like that, you can even see in the style and the popularity of some wrestlers in WWE, there is more a realism to it, and there is a more technical side that needs to be honed, which has always been the British style. Like we're taught how to wrestle, as well as doing the lovely, flippy, like cool moves,
Right.
we're taught how to wrestle and we're taught the very basics, because if you can't do that and you go someplace else, they're expecting you to be able to do that. So if you don't know how to put on even a decent wrist lock, you're kind of like, did they actually get taught right? And yeah, I think it's yeah, there's always been this growth, but when Drew went over, I think at first there was the belief that, well, WWE have their Scottish guy, they have their British guy, they had Drew was their Scottish guy, Sheamus was their Irish guy, Wade Barrett was their English guy, they had those guys. But then when Drew came back, it was literally like putting a firework up everybody's arse, because it was like, right, come on, if he's back, and look at him, he's a very good friend of mine, but he's this big, he's like this presence when he walks in. Like, you can feel the rooms change when Drew walks in, because he's just such a big presence. But if he's coming back and he's putting in the shift and trying to get better and trying to change his appearance, trying to change his attitude, trying to change everything about him, if the prototype is changing, then everybody else has to, and everybody sort of upped their game. It became a thing where it wasn't impossible anymore, especially when he went back, and then with a UK tournament and that happening, Christ, what, 4 years ago now?
Yeah.
It kind of made it possible. Like, WWE was no longer the pipe dream. It wasn't, I want to be a rock star anymore kind of dream. It was feasible and possible, and you even got a chance to learn with things like the Performance Centre and that happening. It wasn't just a chance, you had to be great in order to be hired. Absolutely. You could be good and be seen to have great potential, and you could be coached into being incredible. So like guys like, if you think about it, like guys like the Velveteen Dream, for example, where they seen that he was coachable. It wasn't that he was perfect walking in the door. They seen we can do something with him. And that's more that if you have the drive and the passion and the motivation to get better, that's what they're now looking for. So Drew was a big motivator for the country, UK, everybody. And I think he was a motivating for the independent scene, not just his home country, which of course his home country is going to go, yeah, but across the world, if a guy like that is going to come back and want to be the number one wrestler in the world, it is possible, and you can do it too.
Absolutely. But since you brought up the topic of WWE, I have to ask you, now they're hiring people of all shapes, sizes, races, it's an open world now in the WWE. Mm-hmm. But do you think that they treat all the people the same, of all the sizes, of all races, or do you still think that there is a little bit of bias because of the corporate world?
I mean, I think it depends on where you're talking and who's dealing with it, because you've got to understand in the fact that not every level is dealt with by the same person.
Right.
So the idea, like the amount of times you'll hear the argument of Vince is always the scapegoat. No. Vince doesn't like this. Vince doesn't do that. When in a lot of times, Vince doesn't know. Like Vince hasn't. It's not been brought to Vince's attention. And I think there has been a massive shift. Like if you look up from, even if you go back 10 years, sure, be it from gender or whatever, there has been a massive shift. And if there's been a massive shift, then there's the hope that continues. Yes. Like it's not just all going to change overnight. It is going to be a slow developing project, because it's also the fact is that we might live in a world and us as individuals can see that's not right and that needs to change. But there is also, we've got to be realistic that there are people that watch the programming that if there was such rapid changes, they would switch off. And if they switch off and the viewers aren't there, then television stations aren't going to want them on. Absolutely. It's the idea that you've got to try and slowly implement it so that it's just normal. So like for me, I absolutely adore Mustafa Ali, like as a performer.
Right.
The way he talks, his attitude and everything, his backstory as a Chicago police officer who's a Muslim, and how he wants to change people's perception. When he talks about when he was on the Independence, he was always like, he went for the stereotypical bad guy role.
Right.
When he realised that, which is terrible. Which when you think about it, you're like, yeah, why are you doing that? But at the time, you felt like that's what it was. But now he realises, no, like you need to have a positive role. You need somebody to. If it's also the idea of like, there's going to be the adults that will never change their opinion, and we like racism and homophobia and sexism and chauvinistic behaviour is completely outdated and needs to get rid of. But there's going to be those people that are so stubborn that they're never going to change, no matter how much fact or anything you put. It's the people that I say there's a generation of people who believe that their emotions and opinions are facts, when in actual fact, it doesn't matter how many facts you put in front of them. They're like, this is what I think. And I go, but you're wrong. No, this is what I think, and they'll stick to it.
Yeah.
But now you've got to try and educate the young and those coming up that, no, because if an adult was to go to a kid like, a Muslim's a bad man, that kid can go, Mustafa Ali isn't. Like, he's a good man. It's that kind of, that's the approach that's got to be put against it. And it's the same way, you know what I mean? It's a whole sort of thing. So there are movements, and I'm glad to see there are.
That's a beautiful answer, like for real. If I've asked the same question to numerous wrestlers, and usually I get an answer as a yes or a no. And no is very rare. I usually get a yes. They're not treating them equally. Jen, to hear your perspective, and it's so unique and so right, I really appreciate your perspective. It's very true.
No, it's fine. It's something that like I do take a great interest in it, and I do like, I know we're in any promotions that I work in and I have any close like working relationship with, I always want to make sure that everybody, so like obviously as a female, I want to make sure that the women feel safe in their locker room. And I'm glad to say, like, I work for like certain promotions, and there's like promotions, like a promotion in Liverpool called TNT, for example, like they've always made sure that there is a women's locker room just for the women, and the women aren't outnumbered, and there is the array of women are great, like, and it's trying to make sure that we do get all backgrounds, all walks of life and everything walking through the door, be it male or female. And yeah, it needs to just be something that's accepted, but it's going to take time. Nothing just happens overnight. And as long as we keep at it, and as long as we stand by those that need the support, it doesn't matter if it's for Black Lives Matter or refugees or trans or homosexual. Like, if, like, for me, I've always believed if as long as you're not a dick, we're cool. Yeah. Right? I don't care who you pray to. I don't care what you look like. I don't care who you love. As long as you're a decent human being, that's all that really matters. That's how I'll judge you. I'll judge you from if you're a dick or if you're nice. And that's wholeheartedly it. And as long as people that are like me, that believe that, stand by those who need the help. And at times, I mean, I'm fully aware as being white, that I have a privilege that some people don't. And I will never understand what you fully go through. But when I need to shut up and listen, I shut up and I listen. And when I need to stand by you, I'll stand by you so that you don't feel uncomfortable. And you're in the world, which is our home.
Love that. Very, wow. I'm speechless. That's like beautiful. I wish that there were more people like you, and wow, I'm really speechless.
I think there are, though. In all honesty, I think there are a lot of people who are exactly like me, but unlike me, I know how to talk. It's one of the things that I think I get booked in places a lot because my ability to find the words to say about things and things like that. So I think I'm lucky in a sense that I have platforms like this, but I am able to string a coherent word, like sentences together in order to convey how I feel and how other people feel, where some people are like, this is how I feel, but I don't know how to say it. And they're also worried, like, if I write it on, like, so my problem is I can talk, but I'm dyslexic. So when it comes to writing something physically down, like, I'm lucky I've got, like, my tag partner, Casey Owens. Like, I'm really lucky that normally if I want to write something, I usually go, is this all spelled correctly? And have I put the right words here? And does this word mean what I think it means? Because, like, you get people that are just like, you didn't put an apostrophe beside the R and the E, and it completely, you're like, that's not the point.
Exactly.
It says the same thing. Read the message, not the grammar. But yeah, so I'm lucky in that sense that I can do this. But a lot of people are better at writing. A lot of people convey in the way that they are suited best to.
Absolutely. So, talking about people, what is the general perspective of the people of Scotland when it comes to wrestling? Because, like in America, there are two perspectives. Either wrestling is great or it's fake. It's fake sport. So what is like the general perspective there in Scotland?
I mean, it's interesting. Like, Scotland as a country are very self-deprecating. Mm-hmm. So we're always willing to take the mick at each other and, like, poke fun at one another. But it's one of those things that, like, the amount of times where I've had the weird question of, what is it you do for a living? And I go, I'm a professional wrestler. And they go, what? And I go, I'm a professional wrestler. And they go, oh, right. So, but in the question, they'll go, it's this, that, and the next thing. And I go, oh, do you want to go find out? And their bottle will drop and they'll, and I was like, oh yeah, because you don't want to get beaten up by a girl, is that the problem? And, like, oh God, I genuinely, so the other thing I do apart from wrestling is I work for a company called Inside the Ropes. They're based in Scotland, predominantly Scotland, and we do tours up and down the UK, and we take incredibly famous wrestlers on like Q&A tours. So they can, like, fans can ask questions, or we'll present a full show and people can meet and greet and stuff. And we've done ones with, like, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, we did one with The Undertaker and Mick Foley, Paul Heyman, and all that sort of stuff. So I work with them and I deal with all their merchandise and such like that. But there was one time we were on a train coming back from Manchester.
Okay. And
there was these guys and they were a bit leery and they were and they'd said, and they were like, what is it used to? What is it used to? And they went, she's a wrestler. And I was like, oh, thanks, guys. Thank you. And she's a wrestler. And they were like, she's not like a wrestler to me. And so I'm quite strong. Even though, like, I've always been a strong female. And at that point, I was squatting like 170 kilograms. And I'd gone up to like a PB of like 190 kilograms, which won't be that after COVID. But once I get back, I'll get back to it. But I was like squatting a lot. And my friend Ollie was like, oh, she can squat you. I was like, what? And I was like, she can squat you easy peasy, no problem. Right. I was like, okay. So they ended up making a bet of that. The guy had to squat his friend. And then I had to squat the guy that was squatting his friend. Oh, and, like, at one point I just kind of got about and went, okay. And I stood up and just popped the guy on my shoulder and was just in this moving train.
Oh my God.
And he was just, and as soon as he got off, he was like, oh my God, what the, and I was like, told you I was a wrestler. Like, this is my job. And it's that we're like, yeah, you're always going to get it. But the difference being is in Scotland, normally if you're in like a taxi, the taxi driver will say things like, oh, what are you doing? Professional wrestling. Oh, back in my day, I watched Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks. Or it's, do you know that Grado? And you go, yeah, I know Grado, and yeah, I watch Giant Haystacks, and I've actually done like some training bits for guys like Johnny Sane and trying that. So it's still loved, but you do get like poked fun at, like, but you just kind of start taking it like, yeah, but I can still beat you up, and they go, okay, now shut up, and you go, hey, bye.
So it's interesting. I mean, you don't have to prove yourself to the people with words, but you can do it with your own actions and your own skills, which is great. But when you were growing up, and when did you start watching wrestling, if I may ask?
So I started watching wrestling so basically growing up, there was like me and my little brother, so he's 5 years younger than me.
Okay.
So we were kids. Weirdly, we started watching WCW first because in the UK we used to have these little cable boxes that up till 9 o'clock at night had Cartoon Network on it, and then it switched at 9 o'clock to TNT. So basically on like a Friday night, my parents would go out and we'd get babysat, and then there'd be this switch from Powerpuff Girls to wrestling.
Okay.
And so we ended up watching like Nitro back in the day, and then eventually we sort of started to learn about like WWE, and like The Rock was my brother's idol. Still is. My brother has genuinely said to me, I completely support your decision to be a professional wrestler, because one day I'm going to be The Rock because of you. Like, and that's my brother's like, I support it because she's going to meet Dwayne Johnson. Like, to this day, still says that, and I go, thanks, David. So yeah, like growing up, like David was The Rock and I was Stone Cold, and we would physically fight. Like, there's nothing better than like giving your younger brother a stunner and taking a rock bottom from a guy that's like shoulder height to you and trying to jump up to take it. So yeah, like I watched as a kid, and then ended up like watched it barely when I went through high school, but then like it wasn't until like when I started really, really getting into it again and fully like loving it. Like my guy was like my favorite. I always say like my favorite is Edge. Like his attitude, his like the cockiness of him and everything like that. And like Inside the Ropes did a tour with Edge, and I was for a couple of days a giggling little schoolgirl, and I kept having to like take myself out the room and going, get yourself together, Moles. Come on, Spartan. Let's do this, and then go back in being a professional, which the Inside the Ropes crew absolutely loved, because I'm cool, calm, and collected all the time. And then Edge came, and I was like, can't do this, no. But like he was incredible, and like he's been very supportive afterwards and stuff. Hasn't been weird, but yeah, like Edge was the guy I loved. And then of course when like CM Punk came on the scene, being someone that had sort of actively already decided to become straight edge from like the age of like, weirdly I didn't know I was straight edge. I was straight edge, and it wasn't until like I was like 16 that somebody went, so you're straight edge. I didn't know it was a thing. My life choices ended up translating, going, so this is what you are. And then obviously looked at it and it was like, oh yeah, I am. And then having a guy like him come on the scene, who again, killer on a microphone, backed everything up, but had this life choice that he stuck to, and I was like, yeah, okay, like that's relatable. So yeah, like grew up watching it, but at first I didn't, as I saying, like I didn't essentially go into wrestling to be a wrestler. It was weird. Like I always had it in my head, like I was always quite a big girl even growing up. I was never like, I'm not like going, oh, woe is me, I'm this and the next thing. It's just I was always physically bigger, be it I was just a bigger girl, be it height and everything. There was all these small girls around me. It always has been. So weirdly, as a teenager, you get all these self-doubting thoughts and things like that. So I always never seen myself to be a wrestler, because I always like thought like, well, I'm not exactly the size and shape of Kelly, so I'm never really going to be that.
Yeah. And when you were at that time, wrestling was a whole different world for them. Yeah, agreed. Yeah. So
I never really see myself. So in turn, I thought, right, well, I'll reflect on my studies. So instead I went and studied television. Like I've got a degree in television and things like that. I've got a degree from Edinburgh in television and stuff like that. And it was because like the WWE's website, when you were looking for job applicants, that's the sort of qualifications they were looking for. So that's what I decided I was going to try and do. I was going to try and work in the world rather than be a wrestler.
Yeah.
Then I ended up falling into ICW. Weirdly, I did a documentary on a comedy club that's in Edinburgh and Glasgow called The Stand. Really revered comedy club. Like anybody in British comedy has done The Stand. Like, I mean, everybody has done The Stand. And it's this wee club, and people go back there still. So, like, your big names in British comedy go back there to show their workings and to sort of feel it out.
Yeah.
But I did a documentary on that, and I ended up following a guy called Billy Kirkwood, who'd just become the colour commentator for ICW. And it was him that said to me, he's like, you should come along to the show, you'll absolutely love it. Went along, loved it, and then ended up saying, like, hey, like, I can get you a camera. Like, at uni, I get access to cameras and lights and microphones and stuff. I can get you access to that for at least a year. And they went, yeah, okay. And I went, I needed a work placement. I was like, I just need you to sign. She came to shows and she did work, and that'll be great for the college stuff. And they were like, okay. And I ended up just staying.
Yeah.
Filmed. And then GPWA was opening up. So Glasgow Pro Wrestling Asylum. And it had, like, at the start, it was BT Gunn, Wolfgang, now past Lionheart, Jack Jester and Red Lightning as the coaches. And I'd gotten to know the guys through filming them for 4 or 5 years beforehand.
Right.
Knew that they were great at their game, and also they had a new look on how they wanted to coach people. And as a friend at the time, I genuinely went, look, okay, if you're wanting to do this, I'm trainee number one. And they were like, what? And I was like, well, at least you've got one. You've got one person coming to your school. You just need to find the rest. And they were like, okay. And so I was in class number one, was the first girl and trainee of GPWA. So I did that as like a friend, but in my head, I was like, right, they now do a 6-week course, but it's like it was an 8-week course at first. And basically they wanted to do 8 weeks. You come every Sunday, you do that, and then after the 8 weeks, you're either told you've got something and we can continue this on further, or they're honest and they say things like, right, I think it's either not for you or you need to go. So there was people that couldn't do forward rolls, for example.
All right.
But it was a lot to do with like their physical health. So it was like, go away, maybe lose a couple of pounds, but not like you need to get skinny. It's literally you can't physically do things because of your weight. So go away. And there was people that did that. People would go away, get themselves in better shape, come back, be able to do forward rolls and backward rolls. Just there's simple foundations of wrestling, really. And then after that, I remember genuinely sitting there, and although he's passed now, Lionheart, Adrian sitting with me and saying, I'm going to be honest with you, mate, I thought you were going to be terrible. Okay. And I was like, oh, thanks. He went, I thought you were going to be terrible, but you're not. Yeah. You're actually surprised. So that's when I sort of started training and sort of learning from there. So yeah, when I first came in, it wasn't just to be the wrestler. So I'd learned everything on the outside of the ring before I stepped in. Because at first I thought, I'll do the 8 weeks, I'll learn a different perspective. I'll learn, like, what can I bring to the table? Like, if I know how things are set up physically in the match, then I might understand, like, filming somebody better or trying to make sure that this is sold or that's... So I wanted to bring a new perspective to my filming, and in turn it turned out, oh, wait, I could be a wrestler? And I've kind of never looked back.
It's beautiful. So while training, did you ever have second thoughts that, hey, maybe, not a good idea? Or was it like a smooth journey that, no, this is what I'm going to do?
I mean, it was surprisingly a lot smoother than I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
I thought that, like, maybe after the 8 weeks, that would just be it. And then I'd learn a new perspective on things and then take that into the other side of things, especially because I'd spent years getting my degree. Like, it wasn't just something that just happened overnight. I'd done, and like, to study that, it wasn't even where I lived. I had to like so I was from Fife, so I had to like get up at like 6 in the morning to make sure I was on a bus for 7 a.m. to get to Edinburgh in order to walk to my uni, to then come back, and then I was doing my work placement with ICW. So it'd been years of work to get to where I was and to try and get to where I wanted to be. And then I got a ring and it changed. Like, it was so strange. It was the idea of like, at that point as well, that's when Viper started to like, so Piper Niven really started to sort of come out her shell and be noticed. And for someone like Viper, who is one of the nicest, sweetest, loveliest human beings you will ever have the courtesy of meeting, she was just making names and nobody was going on about, like, people were embracing her and were going like, I'm so proud to see a woman who's not this tiny little thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's loads of girls that I work who are slim and petite and so much smaller than me.
Right.
And they're needed. They're 100%, like, just because they're wee doesn't mean they're weak or anything, but they have their role. And it was learning the fact that what I physically bring to the table is also a commodity that's needed for someone. Although I'm not humongous in any way, shape or form, even those girls are needed. Like, I get excited now when I find girls that are bigger than me. Like when Jessica Havoc comes out on Impact, I'm like, yes, there's part of me that's like, I really want to wrestle her because I'd be wee.
Right.
And I could climb her and it'd be great. And like, I get so excited when I see bigger girls now because I'm like, I want to get in the ring with them, because then it's no longer me just being the big girl. I'm equal. It can be an equal fight. There's like a girl here called Gia Adams that I absolutely love getting in the ring with because she's slightly taller than me, but we're pretty much eye to eye. Big sort of broad girls, and we absolutely knock the living crap out of one another, and it's great every time. We just throw each other into walls and because we can, and we're just like, yes, every time, because it's great, and I love it, and I love the fact that it's now a thing. Like, you've got, even on Raw stuff, you've got like your Nia Jax and that coming through, and Raquel Gonzalez. Oh my Lord, I get so excited about her future, because there was like a month and a half ago, she had a match with Shotzi Blackheart, and it was incredible. The whole first segment, like the first part of it, was like, the psychology of it was incredible. It was so well thought through, and I've went on about it, and I get so excited to see her because she knows her role. She knows she's a big girl. She knows she's powerhouse. And to see that happening, and now people can relate on television, they can go, oh, she's big, so she can work like these girls. And it's that, like, kids understand it better now as well. If it's not just, and also, like, this sounds mad, but since bigger girls have appeared on television, things like fat shaming it's still there, and it's horrendous, but it has gone dramatically down. Like, from when I first started wrestling to now, it's not like, I've not been called fat while I've been wrestling in a long time, which is refreshing, because when I first started, they'd be little kids going, shut up, fatty. And although, like, they didn't understand what they were saying was so cutthroat.
Horrible.
It's now not a thing, because they're like, oh no, she's just big. Okay, that's fine. And parents are teaching, like, no, you can't do that. That's body shaming. Like, everybody's different shapes and sizes, and that's just life. And as long as it's portrayed on television, it just gets accepted into society.
Sure. I mean, that's the worst part about the people that they don't understand many times what they're saying can be so hurtful and so wrong. And that's not just about body shaming. It could be about anything. It could be about gender.
Mm-hmm.
It could be about your sexual orientation. There's a lot of xenophobia in the industry even now. If you look at a lot of stuff. So I'm glad that it's on TV now and people are getting more aware and accepting it more into. But it's kind of sad that it has to be on TV before it gets accepted.
Yeah.
Which
it's a weird sort of thing where it's like, I think when it's on television, kids understand it more because the difference. I think a lot of people sometimes struggle though because it's the idea of like, I'm usually the heel in a match, predominantly, normally the heel. I'm very vocal and stuff like that, so it's normally the role that I play.
Okay,
but when it comes to it, it's the idea of like, but you're the bad guy. We can say bad things to you. You go, yeah, but to an extent, when did I stop being the bad guy and you're the bad guy now? Because you're coming after me physically. You're coming after something so personal. It's not, you're no longer going after Molly Spartan's actions. You're coming after me personally because of my appearance. And like, there's a certain point, like, there's a difference between calling somebody a chicken and putting them in a chicken suit and it being like chicken, chicken, chicken. That's not them. But when it comes to their actual physicality or their, if they're, their religious background or whatever,
absolutely,
that's when it stops being about bad guy, boo wrestler and somebody's personal, and it's got to try and but it's not just to be on wrestling, it's just to try and educate, not just in wrestling on television, just in society, when it becomes more, and there's characters that are just like, so I'm saying like my love for Mustafa Ali is because he's an incredible performer, but the fact that his background is educating kids and even adults that
you're right,
you know what I mean, like when they've been taught like this is bad and it's garbage. Like he is a role model now for so many people, and not just those of sort of from not just Muslims, just in general, because kids look up to him now. Plus, he's an absolute diamond. Like did you hear about like his mask? He sent his mask that he had from WrestleMania to a girl that had respiratory problems. And she wanted to get a mask to make her mask and asked him, like, where did you buy it? And he sent it to her. And I was like, you're just a good man.
And the one thing about Mustafa Ali and his character in the WWE is that they're not portraying him as a typical Muslim character.
Yeah. You don't throw, in all honesty.
Yeah.
See that point where they changed his name? Remember when he was Mustafa Ali and then he became Ali at some point and then he was back to Mustafa Ali? When you took Mustafa away from him, I was furious. I was like, wait a minute, this is kind of the point. But also, like, I'm sorry, you're incredible, Mustafa Ali, but you're not Ali.
Sure.
Ali is Muhammad Ali. You write Ali and you think of Muhammad Ali. You can't just, no. He's Mustafa. Well, if they learn that Mustafa is a name and is a proper name, that's accepted. Like, it just is. Sorry. This is me calm. You should have seen me when it first happened. I was furious.
Molly, I've got to ask you this because you literally broke your character during this interview. And I've got to ask you that you're a baby face in real life and you cannot hide that anymore. Yeah, you're a baby face. So is it hard? You're not. Well, you look like.
I'm just really good. I'm ploying you in to break your heart at the end. That's all.
Well, if you're doing really good being a baby face, in real life, so how does it work out? What are you most comfortable in, being a heel or a face in the ring?
I think it all depends. Like, this is the thing. Like, the whole heel face thing, I think, is becoming a bit. It's a weird sort of process because, it's a very old school thing. Like, when we're doing a family show and it's all kids and stuff, there's you put the basic principles in of like bad guy cheats, good guy doesn't, blah blah, and that's all great, and it's all the show and stuff. But there's this sort of weird point. So, like, I've said it before, like, my tag team partner is a girl called Casey Owens. We are a team called the She-Wolves, and we also have Lana Austin from sort of the Manchester area, who's part of that as well, and we perform at a place called TNT in Liverpool. And we are, like, our actions are still the same. We are the bad guys, but our argument is that we want equality for both the male and the female side of things, and it's not just it's not the performers, it's to do with the management and stuff. So there's this weird sort of twist where folk go, okay, they're loudmouth, they're gobby, they don't do things necessarily in the clean-cut way, but at the same time, we don't necessarily just disagree with them. Like, our arguments have always been, and yeah, we've done some shady stuff, but it's this weird sort of now point where folk are like, I don't really know if they're bad or if they're good. And I think for me, it all depends on the role. Like, I will happily high-five kids and things like that, but at the same time, I'm normally placed as the bad guy. And I think it's that because I'm vocal, because I'm not shy to shout at people. Like, it's a weird sort of thing that I've said to people, like, if you want to be a really good heel, you need to get comfortable in confrontation. And although you say it's weird and it's in wrestling because wrestling is a confrontation, it's not necessarily to do with the person you're in the ring with, it's everybody else. Sure. Can you take a slagging? Can you be physically booed in your face and be fine with it? Because some folk can't. Like, they just can't cope with people disliking them. Like, there are people out there who absolutely hate my guts on sight purely for what I've done in a ring. Nothing to do with me personally. They just despise Molly Spartan. And that's, to me, it's great. Like, I remember, like, one of the first shows I did for TNT, somebody threw a cup at me.
Oh my God.
And I was losing it. Like, but like, to me, it was a weird sort of thing. Like, after it, management were like, we'll find out who it was, we're going to do this and the next thing, blah, blah, blah. But I'd like threw the cup back and I was just like, whoever threw that outside after this, no holds barred, but and they were like, like, it was just that instant, like, oh God. And although management were on it and were like, we'll deal with this, I was like, no. I went, that's kind of great. It's terrible and it should never be done. And don't throw things at wrestlers. Don't be a dick. But It was that instant heat of like, they hate me that much that they've done that. And to be honest, it turned out it was Casey Owens that threw the cup at me. Okay. And she had to admit it afterwards. She was like, it was me. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I was going to kill a fan. And it was you. And she was like, yeah. There was like a wee group of fans like to the left that were like, oh, you're in trouble. Because I didn't know it was her during the match. And it wasn't until afterwards that I was like, no, bitch, I was going to kill somebody because of you. But yeah, it's that kind of thing. So I will do the job that I'm told to do. But yeah, like, I think just, I'm like, in real life, I think people are warm to me. But in the ring, like, I can actually just be a dick if I need to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty okay with it.
Okay. Well, talking about being a dick, I have to ask you that one thing about, wrestling is that you have to be very safe, a safe worker. You have to make sure, that you don't get anyone hurt. Now, how difficult is that? And how much did you have to train to be a safe worker in the ring? Because, training to hurt somebody is one thing, but training to hurt somebody and not hurting them is a whole different thing. So how much work does it go into it?
I think it's very, very, very important that you go to a good school. Like, I was very comfortable in the fact that my coaches were all very good at their areas. So it wasn't like I just had like one guy to go to. I had many different opinions. Yeah. And to go to a good school and to actually invest yourself to go to a good school. Because the amount of times I've heard the sentence, but I go to the gym. And I go, that means nothing. Like, you can be in the best shape of your life, have an 8-pack and a chest bar out to here and an extra pair of Brock Lesnar shoulders on you and on the go. But if you've never done any in-ring training, you're useless. Because it's not even that, like, wrestling is very much a trust thing. Like, you might not like the person, like, as in like a personal sense, you might not like the other person in the ring, but you need to at least trust them that when you're in that ring with them, you are there to do the job and you're there to do it safe, and you've both got to get out. And like, I've said this before in the past without like really causing any like issues, when like my partner, like, will text me going, how was the match? And if it wasn't the best match in the world, I always come out of it going, it wasn't incredible, but no one got hurt. And that for me is the key. Like, a bad match to me is when somebody gets hurt, because that's the point. Like, not clumps each other. Like, I'm not like, I will, like, I'm not hold back to do some light thing. Like, I'm never going to do that. I'll hit you, and I will very much rather you hit me than pussy out of it and not actually touch me or anything like that. But as long as I know you've been trained correctly, then it's fine. So yeah, some schools aren't cheap. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just a £15 a month direct debit out your bank account, but you do need to invest in yourself in order to be part of a good school and to get different perspectives and different opinions as well. And yeah, like, the amount of people that just assume like, oh, but I go to the gym, I can do this, and I go, you've not got a clue. And there's people that I've seen who are in the best shape in their life, but they're not. There's a difference between being in shape and in ring shape, because if you can't go, like, if you don't know how to like convey a bit of energy in order to finish, or you don't know the knowledge if something doesn't go right, how to react and what to do and how to grab something, things like that, I don't want in the ring with you. Like, you need to have some. I want to ask, like, oh, who, like, and it shouldn't be a problem. Like, you know what I mean? If I was to ask a girl, like, oh, what schools are you training at? They should be able to answer the question, and it's not a big thing. Like, oh, I go here. Oh, that's cool. So you're with blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Well, they've actually got, yeah. And it's a conversation that's had. Like, at my school now, although it started with those 5, there's also Kaylee Ray coaches at it, Stevie Xavier, or Stevie Boy coaches at it, Jackie Polo, Liam Thompson, and Fife, we've got one with Andy Wild. So, like, there is a breadth, like a massive sort of options to go to. And having somebody like Kaylee Ray on your coaching staff is just, for a female, although she wasn't there at the start, she's there now. And she'll say, like, oh, mind watch this, or things like that. And I say it's because she's getting in the ring with some of the best in the world, and females in the world, and how to go about things. Because also I don't know, like, girls have extra bits that boys don't, and boys have extra bits that girls don't. So you need to learn how to wrestle them so that you don't, interfere in bits you shouldn't interfere in.
That's right.
Like, I remember the first time I tried to do a line of clotheslines, and at that point I was the only girl in the class, and how reluctant some of the boys were, because they were like, yeah, but she's... And I'm like, I get you're trying to be polite, boys, but you're hitting me here, just like I hit you there. If you hit me here, you've done it wrong. And they're like, okay, but they were trying to be nice about it, but at the same time, you also need to go, right, come on, let's get this done. But yeah, if you want to be a wrestler, go to a school. Don't just roll about a ring. Don't just, get trained, because if you're not trained, you're unsafe and you're going to hurt somebody.
No, you have not reached the end of the interview yet, as Molly Spartan is just too good for one episode. Head over to episode number 10 for part 2 of this interview with the incredible Molly Spartan.